Hello you guys and welcome to my channel. I'm so excited to have you here. So in today's video, I'm going to be doing something a little bit differently. So normally I do my MLM horror stories series on a Friday, normally the last Friday of every month, or just Fridays in general, because I used to upload MLM horror stories every single Friday for over a year. But I thought I would change it up a little bit and do it on a Monday. And then this Friday, we are going to get the WFAB reality show part 2 reaction, which is very interesting to say the least. So with that being said, let's get into it. If you have an MLM horror story that you want to send me, definitely make sure to send that on over. I will leave the link down below or the email down below that you should be sending your MLM horror stories to, because I have a specific email that I like y'all to send it to keep it all as organized as possible. So let's go with the first story. It states, my MLM induced near-death experience. Hey Deanna, I hope you're well. I watch a lot of anti-MLM channels, but you're my favorite, so I wanted to share my story with you. I'm sorry if this is all over the place. I've never really told many people about this, and when I have, it's been face-to-face, which is way easier than trying to articulate my thoughts while typing it all out. I guess this will kind of be 2 MLM stories in one, because I want to give you some background on my experience with MLM. Thankfully, I've never been sucked into one, but I have watched people get destroyed by them from the sidelines my whole life. I will start by saying that I grew up with a religious mother who spent more time in church than out of it. My mom was involved in everything the church did, and so were my little sister and I. She was in the church choir and put my sister and I in the kids choir. Me and my sister were in AWANA, which, if you don't know, is basically a group for the kids of the church to get together one night a week and play games and memorize Bible verses. My mom brought homemade dishes to every picnic and potluck. She babysat for other church mothers. She was involved in directing plays the church kids would put on. Between choir practice, Awana, and various other church get-togethers, we practically lived in that church. And there was one other thing she was always doing as well, bringing my sister and I over to someone's house once every few weeks or so, where all of the other girls in church would be too. And we would just be allowed to run around and play together while our moms hung out in the living room and talked about candles or cookware or something. I thought these candle parties and dinner parties and whatever else were awesome, because I would just get to spend time with my friends and occasionally get given candy. I do love me some candy, or mini candles to take home. I don't remember a lot of it, but I do remember that I once picked out a really cool blue candle that was like a jello consistency, and my mom ordered it for me, and I waited all excitingly for almost a year, and it never came. All the other little girls had their cool jelly candles of various colors, and I was left out. Anyway, I obviously had no clue what was really going on at the time. I just knew we were struggling, and I always asked my mom why we lived in a little apartment while our church friends had huge, beautiful houses. I grew up in poverty, and my mother was always buying something from these vultures who pretended to be her friends. I even remember her hosting her own pampered chef party one time and being so excited to do it. We eventually ended up in an even smaller apartment in a community specifically for single struggling mothers with their children. I don't know if this is directly because the various MLMs were making her completely broke, but I do know she started going to less and less of those parties, and we eventually stopped going to church altogether. My mom ended up getting heavily involved in drugs, and my sister and I ended up living with our dad. He felt so bad about everything that I was going through and wanted me to have friends again, so he tried to take me back to that church and re-enroll me in Awana so I could see my friends like once a week. I kid you not, the queen of the pampered chef parties herself greeted us and blatantly said to my dad right in front of me that my mother was a loser and I would be a bad influence on the other children, so I wasn't allowed to come to this church anymore. I have never seen my dad look more like he was about to spontaneously combust from rage. He took me out of there so fast, and we went and got ice cream. I never saw any of those girls again and can only imagine what their mothers would say about me. My grandma still lives in that area and has had a few church run-ins with members of that church, and they just gave her dirty looks and walk away as quickly as possible. The most recent time this happened was just a few months ago, and if you want any idea of how ridiculous this is, I just turned 27 recently, so it's been long enough for them to get over whatever their weird issue is. I moved halfway across the country last year for a fresh start with my husband and just started going to church again of my own free will, which I never thought I'd do. I was so scared and kind of had a grudge against Christianity for a long time because of my childhood experience. But I'm so glad I found a nice community and took that step. This church is nothing like my old church, and when I told the pastor and his wife this story, their jaws were on the floor. Now, for the story you've probably been waiting for. When I was 17, my dad wanted to move to the other side of the state, and I wanted to finish high school at the same time I'd started where all of my friends were. My dad allowed me to stay with my friends and her mom because our families got along well, and I was almost 18 anyway. He did take my little sister with him, which made me sad, but I am glad I didn't have to spend the last year of high school totally somewhere new. Part of the reason I told you about my childhood MLM experience is because I wanted to make it clear that I was so used to them. I just kind of saw these weird party moms would always go and have as being totally normal. Therefore, it didn't really set off any red flags for me when my friend's mother started trying to get us to drink these weird chalky shakes all the time and insisting to us that they were valid meal replacements and would boost our immune systems. Turns out another friend of ours' mother was in some MLM and had roped her into it. These shakes were called Zeal, and for the longest time, I could not find an MLM called Zeal and started to question if I'd had some fever dream and made it all up. But I finally found out that the MLM is called Zervita, and Zeal is just their most famous product or something. Just thought I'd mention that in case you want to look into it, because I don't think I've heard any other anti-MLMers I watch ever mention it. Anyway, my best friend's mom was in a tight spot financially, which I felt bad about because I couldn't help but feel like me being there was making it worse. Even though my dad would send me money to take care of myself as much as possible, I hated feeling like I was a burden on them, and it really messed with my mental health. My friend and her mom lived in a fairly spacious but cheap apartment where things would always go wrong. Our friend's mom, who had signed her up for this MLM, was the stereotypical bored housewife with a rich husband who had enough disposable income to risk losses. I had only realized later how predatory this was, but she mentioned at one point that she was just waiting for me to turn 18 so she could recruit me at first before my best friend's mom did. Anyways, I noticed that their friendship was slowly getting more toxic and really suffering and eventually ended completely. And we saw a lot less of our other friend after that. However, my best friend's mom had spent so much money she didn't have on all these shakes and special cups and whatnot that she was absolutely desperate to make some of her money back. She started pushing these products on everyone in the apartment complex to the point where none of the other girls we hung out with who lived there wanted anything to do with us anymore. She would approach random people at the grocery store, and me and my friend would just groan and be so embarrassed. The true horror story happened when I ended up with a terrible ear infection that I was pretty sure was going to claim my life. Okay, maybe I'm a little bit dramatic, but seriously, it was terrible and turned into strep because I tried to ignore it and dismiss it as my allergies acting up since it was becoming spring. I saw a doctor who diagnosed me with the infection and gave me antibiotics. I was taking these for a day or two before I noticed something was wrong. The antibiotics were doing wonders for the pain and swelling in my ear, but my throat was feeling worse and worse. The soreness wasn't getting any better, and now it also felt really tight and almost ached in a way. I kept taking the pills because this was more bearable than the ear pain I had been in, so I figured they were probably helping this new pain and it was probably unrelated. Probably my allergies. That weekend, I was alone with my friend's mom at the apartment because my friend had gone to spend the weekend with her grandmother. I probably could have gone too, but I felt so terrible I couldn't even get out of bed. Thank God I didn't go. Looking back, because her grandma lives in a pretty rural area, far away from a place I could have gotten medical attention. That night, the pain in my throat was so bad I ended up crying to my friend's mom about how I really thought I was going to die, and I felt worse than ever. A lot of the night is a blur, and I don't want anyone to think that she's a bad person, but I remember her eyes lighting up and her saying, "You know what you're gonna do? You're gonna drink some Zeal." I had finished like 3 of these shakes throughout that night, each one harder to swallow than the last. When she finally had to accept that her magical MLM product wasn't doing anything beneficial for me, she asked to look at my throat and immediately threw a coat and shoes on and said, "I'm taking you to the ER now." When we got there, I was rushed ahead of quite a few people in the waiting room who had probably already been there for hours. It turns out something super rare happened to me. I was having some sort of slow onset, extremely delayed anaphylactic reaction, which pretty much never happens to anyone. They were in such disbelief over it that they couldn't make up their mind about whether the antibiotic or the Zeal had done it. But they put that antibiotic on my allergy list just in case, and I haven't been willing to test that theory since. But this was just the beginning to one of the worst nights of my life. Their treatment was to inject me with Benadryl. If you've ever taken this horse tranquilizer in pill form, you know it can pretty much put you in a coma. but injected directly into your bloodstream, I instantly felt like I was on every drug in the world at the same time. My anxiety was sky high, and my own brain was seriously forcing me to fight the sedation effects that would normally just let me sleep this off, and causing the worst panic attack I've ever had instead. It felt like nothing was real, and I was so tired but couldn't even close my eyes, because the second I did, I opened them up again and would sit up gasping for air like I'd stop breathing. I swear, in my antihistamine-induced altered state, I even heard my friend's mom trying to sell shit to the nurse who kept checking in on me. I don't think my mouth would have worked even if I'd had the courage to tell her how messed up that was. I guess I eventually fell asleep because I woke up feeling like I had a hangover at like 6:30 a.m. in the morning, still in the hospital room. I was too tired to pay attention to the conversation the doctor was having with my friend's mom, who had very nicely refused to abandon me and leave me alone the whole night. But I know at one point he said that if she had waited any longer to bring me in, I would have been in real trouble. So yeah, that's the story of how my best friend's mom tried to cure my life-threatening allergic reaction with an MLM shake. She got away from that company and hasn't joined another since. My friend and I still are close to this day, and we all laugh about this now, even though I now have a horrible fear of medication-induced drowsiness and panic when I have to take medication that makes me sleepy, even if it's just NyQuil. Thank you for listening, and sorry if that was too long. Well, that was an insane, wild story, and I'm so happy that you're better and you got through that and everything, because that was a very wild story. The way MLMs are made and the fact that most people don't make money, most people struggle to make money, and they're put in very vulnerable situations. I feel like a lot of MLM reps end up doing things that they wouldn't normally do. So I feel like for this person, the friend's mom, probably today, if she looked back on her experience in the MLM and the fact that she was trying to recruit the nurses while you were nearly dying, I feel like she'd probably look back on that and be like, wow, that's not me. Like, that's not the type of person I am, and be shocked and surprised by the actions of doing so, or her actions of doing what she did. And I feel like a lot of people have that experience, but because of MLMs and how much they promote toxic hustle culture, how much they go after already vulnerable people, and that puts them in even more vulnerable positions, how most people struggle to make an income, all of these factors start to make people do and say things that they wouldn't normally do and say. So I feel like for this person's mom, she probably wouldn't normally do that or act in that way, but because of the situation she was in, she did. And I find that to be really common around 99% of MLMs. So thank you for sharing your story. The next story we are going to be reading is called MLM Horror Story: How Being in the Closet Led Me to Herbalife. So this happened when I was around 19. I'm a 28-year-old woman now and came out last year as gay. So I was very much in the closet back then. I went to a Catholic high school, so I didn't know many other lesbians who were also out. I grew up in a religious household and didn't really have a way to explore my sexuality openly. This was around 2013, so a lot of social media sites were just popping up where people could date and express themselves. There was a girl I was Facebook friends with who was gay and really cute. I met her a few times through mutual friends, and I thought she was pretty cool. I saw she was posting a lot of fitness stuff on Facebook and was getting great results. I wanted to lose weight and also wanted an excuse to talk to / hang out with her, so I responded to one of her Herbalife posts saying I was interested. I had no idea about Herbalife or MLMs at the time, aside from the old ones like Mary Kay or Avon or Pampered Chef. So I went ahead and ordered a bunch of powders and supplements and whatever else she suggested. I had a pretty high paying job at the time, so I didn't really mind spending the $150 to $200 on all of the products, especially since I was young and dumb and thought all these supplements would make a huge difference in my results at the gym. And I wanted to impress her. Anyway, I go to her house and pick everything up, and she gives me some starter guide, which is how to use the products and how often, exercise plans, and a weigh-in schedule. I started, and it was like any other workout / nutrition program. I lost a few pounds and gained muscle, but I think that was more contributed to me eating better and knowing workouts from my brother, who was training to be a Navy SEAL at the time. I would text her once a week documenting my weight, now realizing that it was so I could be one of her success stories that she often posted about. Surprisingly, she never peddled joining the company or selling products. Granted, I didn't stay that long on her program. I went on vacation to my family's cabin, and at the time there was no cell service there. So I texted her my weight before I left since it was the weekly day to do so, and I went off to the woods. After a few days, we drove back, and I guess once I got cell service back, I resent all of the texts that were trying to send while I had no signal, even ones that already partially sent. Suddenly, I get an angry text from her saying, quote, "You're only supposed to weigh yourself once a week. You're not following the program, and you're going to mess everything up," end quote. And she went on about how I wasn't following directions and I'm going to fail on my journey if I do that again. I was honestly in shock. I texted her back explaining the situation to her and immediately told her I was quitting the program. I wasn't buying any more products and was no longer going to follow her program, and told her I was seeing better results doing my own health plan. She never responded, but she kept me on Facebook. Now that I've found anti-MLM content, I feel better about not going through with it anymore. And I know that I'm not alone in almost falling victim to these manipulation tactics. Over the years, she's peddled a few different MLMs, and most of the friend group quickly stopped associating with her, since her businesses became her whole personality. Every other Facebook post was defending her MLMs and trying to call everyone else stupid for not understanding the business model. I'm sure she was taken advantage of by her upline when it came to these things, but in the end, she became the toxic upline. I'm grateful it never went further than that, and I never joined as her downline. I honestly wonder if she ever kept anyone long term, since her attitude was so crappy towards anyone. Needless to say, I no longer have to pretend to be interested in MLM to try to meet other gay women. So I kind of wanted to hit on two things that this person talked about at the end. She talked about the fact that this person that was in the MLM, that was in Herbalife, the MLM kind of became her whole personality. And I feel like this is so common with MLMs. When you join an MLM, what pretty much ends up happening is your whole feed and your whole life becomes the MLM. Every spare moment you have, they're telling you that you need to post. Every spare moment you have, you need to be DMing people to try and recruit them. Every spare moment that you have, you need to be thinking about this MLM and posting and recruiting and signing people up with products and talking about it and going out into your community talking about it and trying to recruit your friends and your family. And it becomes such a soul-sucking task that it becomes your whole personality. And that's why we see a lot of times when people join MLMs, they end up posting about that MLM nonstop, where every page looks the same. You can go on 1,000 MLMers Instagram accounts and look at MLM reps from all different MLMs, and they will all look identical. They will all be posting the same exact post with the same quotes, with the same, style of post, the same editing style. Like everything is so similar because of the way that they are taught to do things in the MLM. So the MLM really does start to become someone's whole entire personality. And I feel like that's a very common thing that happens in MLMs for 90% of people. Another thing that she kind of talked about was the fact that this person was once someone that was taken advantage of by her upline, but in the end, she became that toxic upline. So this person's talking about that victim to predator pipeline that I've talked about before here on my channel, about the fact that when you join an MLM, most people join MLMs in a very vulnerable spot, whether they're a stay-at-home mom, they are struggling financially, emotionally, mentally. Maybe they're struggling with things like depression and anxiety, or maybe eating disorders when it comes to your MLMs that are all about fitness. And once you end up joining, you don't realize that you have been manipulated. You don't realize that the MLM has took advantage of your vulnerabilities in order to get you to join, that you end up taking those same tactics that your upline used on you when you were vulnerable to then use on other people that you're going to recruit. So a lot of people who end up joining MLMs end up becoming someone who recruits those vulnerable people too. They start recruiting people who are struggling mentally and physically, financially, or, struggling with community because they're told to, because they were once that person. And that's why we see a lot with MLMs, people talk about recruit the person you were before the MLM, which pretty much means, hey, if you were struggling with depression, if you were struggling financially, you need to go seek people out who are also struggling with that. So you kind of unknowingly, when you're in the MLM, become your upline in the sense of also recruiting very vulnerable people and manipulating them without even really consciously understanding what you're doing. So I feel like that's a really good point that she made, that she does believe that this upline and this person was once taken advantage of, that they are now doing the same thing to other people. And that's what happens to most people in MLMs. With that being said, thank you so much for sharing your story. Now, this MLM Horror Story is just titled Monet TikToker. So let's see what this is all about. She states, "Hi Deanna, if you read this, please keep me anonymous. I like to think of myself as pretty skeptical when it comes to products and job opportunities," in quotes. "My mom always told me if it's too good to be true, it probably is. So every time I see someone promoting something, I like to look into the company itself. I don't have too many horror stories, but rather 2 run-ins with MLMs. The first run-in with an MLM was with an acquaintance who joined Arbonne. I was fine with what she was doing because it didn't really affect me and she never targeted me specifically until I posted something about being a teacher tired near the end of the school year. She reached out asking if I wanted to get to the root of the problem so that I could have more energy. I was like, girl, I'm a teacher. It comes with the territory. I kind of just laughed it off and ignored it, but I didn't really appreciate her implying that there was a bigger problem to my exhaustion. Teaching during a pandemic and hybrid learning was extremely taxing, both mentally, emotionally, and physically. My second run-in was with a TikToker who was promoting her hair journey. The first video I saw of hers was a way to get heatless curls with a scrunchie. She mentioned how her hair was day 5 hair. And I was floored. It looked so pretty and not at all oily. Soon, I was 20 videos deep in her profile trying to learn more about what she does to get her hair. She would always show what she did, but never the product. That was my first red flag. She chalked it up to everyone has different needs, but it's not a one size fits all situation, which I do agree with, but she never even said the name of the brand. Red flag number 2. Finally, I found a video where she was talking about Rejuvenique oil and alarm bells went off. I've definitely heard that mentioned on your videos before when you've talked about Monet, but then I went to the comments and she was calling it modern nature. I didn't realize until that moment that modern nature and Monet are the same thing. This is why we Google everything. Anyways, I'm just annoyed at how shady these MLMers can be, not showing products, not being transparent about the company, etc. Not really a horror story. I just thought it was worth sharing. My fiance and I love your videos. So yes, a lot of people will do this, especially with Monet or Monet. Monet is known as, or their actual name, what their name is Modern Nature, and that's where they get Monet, Modern Nature from. Like, that's why they're called Monet or Monet, however you pronounce it. And what a lot of people will do is instead of giving the company name, they will say something like that, like Modern Nature, because not most people know about that. Like, most people know Monet as Monet. They don't know it as Modern Nature. So a lot of MLM reps will do this where they will not actually post the name of the company, like Monet, what everybody knows, or Monet. They won't post that it's a multi-level marketing company. They will try and hide and scheme their way to get people to then join them. So this is definitely a common thing. That's why it's so important, like she said, to just Google something, like Googling modern nature, because it'll pop up as Monet. So that's why it's really, really important just to put into Google the name or to look a little bit into something, because you just never know what you may be getting yourself into. Because a lot of reps will not lie about things, but they will go around the truth to then get people to join them. So I wanted to go over one more MLM horror story. So this one is kind of 2 separate parts. This person sent me an MLM horror story July 29th, and then they sent me kind of like an update email on August 11th. So we will scroll down and read the first email first, and then we'll get to the second one. So it starts with, "Yo, I just watched a horror story you covered on Cutco/Vector from probably a year ago. I just recently started your playlist and it totally unlocked a memory from when I was like 18. I forgot I even had this job. Needless to say, it was short-lived, LOL. So I have very minimal memory about all of this, but it started because a friend of mine worked for Vector and she was quitting and looking for her replacement, which is weird looking back. I went in for an interview and the place was sketch. It was in the lower level of this large building that I didn't even know existed and was a tad dingy. Not like crack dealing dinge, but like leaky basement dinge. I was paid an hourly rate. I had set hours and went into work on a schedule. It was just me and my boss in this little office space. I was in the main area and he had his own office where he sat most of the day. My job was to sit at the computer and call the numbers on the screen. It was seemingly a legit system. It had the phone numbers, name, and a script I would read from. It wasn't like an Excel sheet, but it was some program that almost reflected the call system we had when I was a medical assistant. Most of the calls went to voicemail, so I generally read off off the voicemail script. I don't recall anyone being mean to me, and I am sorry, but I can't remember a single conversation I've had with anyone. I want to say the script mentioned a base pay, but I can't remember what it was. $15 comes to mind, but don't quote me on that. My boss told me he had employees who were the sellers, and I was essentially the receptionist. I would see the salespeople on occasion, flashback to some tall, bald man with a briefcase, but I essentially knew nothing. Just called people all day from a list in the computer. No idea where the list came from or if it was like a phone book import. I have no clue. The work area was a disaster. Papers and clutter all over the place. There was a time where my boss was out for a few days, so I organized all his papers into an accordion folder, tidied up my desk, etc. When he got back, he was livid that I did all of that. To give you an idea, the floor of the closet was literally a few inches deep of just documents. I didn't read them, but they would have the titles of similar context, so I grouped them together that way. I don't remember much else. I think one day I just stopped showing up to work and didn't do an official resignation. I'm not even confident that I was 18 at the time. I was super young and naive, but I didn't sell anything and I got a steady paycheck. My boss didn't appear to sell anything and was just the boss of all these other salespeople. I have no idea if this is common for this company or if you can share any knowledge of that. I'm in my 30s now, so this was in the 2010 time range. Memory unlocked. What a wild time. So that was her first email. So her second email says, hey, so I reached the part of your playlist where you mentioned your specialized horror story email, so I'm forwarding you this one. It's after midnight and I randomly thought, I wonder if me and this girl have messages from that time. And girl, I have screenshots. They were from 2011 and I guess me and my friend both worked there at the same time, but never the same days. Our conversations would just ramble off topic, so I didn't include those bits. But yeah, it has the hours I worked and gives an idea of how poorly we were paid. Okay, so I'm not going to read these messages because I feel like it'd be really confusing because it's a bunch of different dates, but the general gist I got is both of them complained about the calling that they have to do. So cold calling in general seems like it could be really draining, especially if people aren't answering or they're hanging up on you. So they both definitely were talking about how they both hated that and hated doing the cold calls and how the people over the phone just didn't like them. And then they talked about the fact that they put in their 2 weeks. And then one girl was saying that the guy was not going to pay her on the correct date. So it kind of seemed like he wouldn't pay them properly, like a normal job. When you get paid, you would get paid say every single Friday or every other Friday through direct pay. It seemed like this guy was a little bit shady with the way that he was paying them. By the looks of it, they weren't actually in the MLM. They were doing where, if you guys have seen my MLM horror stories on Vector or Cutco, they're pretty much the same thing. But what they will do is they will literally interview you for a job, and then that job will be you pretty much doing all the cold calls and stuff for them. So you would be the one to do all the cold calls, and you would pretty much recruit people and get people to buy the products for the person who's in the MLM. So kind of what an assistant would do, like if an MLM rep were to hire an assistant and say, hey, I'm going to pay you $15 an hour for you to respond to everyone in my DMs and pretty much do all the work for me for the MLM. That's what these people were doing in Cutco and Vector. That's kind of what they do, is they will hire people and they will pay them. Like you'll get paid $15 an hour to work a couple days a week, kind of like an assistant would. And then you should be getting paid that Friday or whatever. So it's not that these two people actually joined Cutco, like they signed up to become an MLM rep, but they ended up being hired for a job positioning that they thought was real, and they did not expect it to be an MLM clearly. And then they just thought it was a job where you did cold calls and the normal sales, but it turned out to not be that. So it seemed as if this guy wasn't properly paying them and they had to complain about needing this steady paycheck and getting paid on time. So that definitely seemed like the gist of it. And that's why I think it's so shady. What Cutco and Vector do is they don't tell you it's an MLM. A lot of the times they'll go by the name Vector, which is not very known compared to the name Cutco, but instead they will present themselves as Vector. And the fact that they are a real job, they'll go on sites like LinkedIn where you're not actually allowed to post about multi-level marketing companies, but they will go on places like that and make it look like it's a real job opportunity. Then they will hire you for an hourly rate, and then you'll end up literally just being an assistant to an MLM rep and pretty much doing what MLMs reps are told to do. You're just doing it for them. So I definitely think Cutco and Vector are a lot more shady when it comes to their recruitment tactics. Also, a lot of times I've seen people actually go to a Vector or Cutco interview and then they'll join MLM, but they'll be told it's a job, but they don't get paid. They don't get an hourly rate. They have to wait until, they sell a product or something like that. So they won't really know that they joined an MLM. So to me, it's a lot of false advertising, false marketing, all of that. So they'll have people think that they're getting an actual job and it'll turn into you joining an MLM unknowingly, which is also really messed up and is false advertising for a job when it's not really a job. You're an independent contractor, so you'll have to do taxes that way and everything like that. To the IRS, you're not going to be looked at as having an actual job. So I definitely think that, in my opinion, this company is one of the sneakiest ones when it comes to pretending to have job opportunities, but instead you're either joining the MLM or being an assistant to an MLM rep doing a bunch of MLM rep work where it's not a legitimized company where you're getting paid properly like these people. So yeah, with that being said, thank you so much for sharing your story. So if you have an MLM horror story that you want to send me, make sure to send that over to my MLM horror stories email that I will leave linked down below. If you also have any MLM team calls, MLM fails, or just in general a topic for a video that you want me to post about or to make a video on, definitely make sure to send that over to me too, and I will show you guys how to do that in the description below, or I will tell you guys how to do that in the description below. I have literally over 15 emails of team calls and MLM fails that I really need to go through and organize. So that is what I'm going to be focusing on this week. So definitely make sure to keep sending those over if you would like to. And I'm definitely going to be getting to all of those emails and organizing all of that content that you guys want me to react to and looking over that. But with that being said, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And I will see you guys in Friday's video. And I just turned 27 recently, so it's been a long enough for the, go back. That had been, what the fuck? In parentheses, she said, teaching Dura. Can I get it together? Guess we shall see. Oh, shit. Let's try now.